Murder on Maple Street. The case that terrified a town. The morning after. Like, comment, and subscribe if you think you've seen small town secrets before, because this one will make you lock your doors tonight. Maple Street was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked. A quiet lane in Albany, New York, framed by maple trees and white picket fences, where everyone knew everyone. But on the morning of October 17, 1964, that illusion shattered forever. At 7:14 a.m., a neighbor named Helen Murphy walked across the street to deliver a newspaper to her friend, Catherine Blackburn. Catherine was a kind woman in her early 40s, a librarian, loved by her community, and known for her punctual morning routine. But that morning, her curtains were drawn tight. Her porch light was still on, and the front door, strangely, was ajar. Helen called out, "Catherine?" No answer. When she stepped inside, the smell of strong coffee and something metallic filled the air. The radio played faintly from the kitchen, a weather report droning about an approaching storm. And then Helen saw the overturned chair, the broken teacup, and the trail of water that led down the hall. By the time the police arrived, Maple Street was lined with squad cars and stunned onlookers. The crime scene was sealed, and word spread faster than the wind. Catherine Blackburn, the woman everyone thought they knew, had been found lifeless in her own home. Detective Arthur Hale took the lead. He was a veteran investigator, methodical, quiet, and not easily shaken. But even he felt something about this case was wrong. Too careful, too precise. There was no sign of forced entry, no fingerprints on the door, no sign of theft. Only one thing seemed deliberate: a single photograph placed on the kitchen counter. It showed Catherine with a group of people, 3 men and a woman, standing in front of a small-town courthouse, smiling. The back of the photo was dated August 1958 and signed with one name, MD. When Hale asked around, no one on Maple Street recognized the initials. But Helen Murphy, trembling as she spoke, told the detective something strange. A week before her death, Catherine had confided that she was waiting for a letter that could change everything. Detectives searched the home for that letter but found nothing. Instead, they discovered a small metal key taped beneath her writing desk. No one could identify what it unlocked. The investigation soon turned toward Catherine's past. She had moved to Albany 8 years earlier, after what neighbors called a bad marriage. No one knew the details. Her husband, Franklin Blackburn, had reportedly died in a car crash in 1957, but the police could find no record of his death certificate, no burial, and no surviving family. When Detective Hale requested the old records from Catherine's hometown of Binghamton, he was told those files had been lost in a courthouse fire, the same courthouse shown in the photograph. The more Hale dug, the deeper the inconsistencies grew. The fingerprints on Catherine's teacup didn't match anyone in the state database. The key was traced to a local storage facility that had been abandoned since 1960. And a neighbor recalled seeing a dark green sedan parked across the street the night before, one that didn't belong to anyone nearby. 2 days later, the sedan was found abandoned behind an old diner outside of town. Inside were cigarette butts, a map of Albany with Maple Street circled, and a motel receipt dated the day before Catherine's death. The name on the receipt, M. Dalton. But the motel clerk swore that the man who checked in wasn't named Dalton at all. He was sure of it. "It was her," he said, voice shaking. "The woman from the photo." Detective Hale stared at the photograph again, his mind racing. Catherine, standing next to a courthouse that no longer existed, with people who didn't show up in any record, smiling at a camera like she already knew how her story would end. He flipped the picture over one more time, and that's when he noticed something that made his pulse quicken. Faint indentations beneath the initials, letters pressed into the back as if written in haste. It wasn't MD at all. It read, "Maple, don't." The detective looked toward the window. where the faint outline of Maple Street stretched beyond the yellow tape. Whatever Catherine had been running from, it had found her. The key in the secret room. If you think Maple Street couldn't get darker, think again. Like, comment, and subscribe, because what Detective Hale finds next will make you question every smiling neighbor you've ever met. 3 days after Catherine Blackburn's body was discovered, Detective Arthur Hale sat in his office surrounded by evidence bags, but none of them made sense. The small brass key, the photo marked Maple, Don't, and the motel receipt under the false name M. Dalton. Every piece felt connected, yet the picture refused to form. At 6:30 a.m., Hale received a call from Officer Lacey. "Sir, we traced the key. The key belonged to a storage locker on the outskirts of Albany, in a facility shut down 5 years earlier due to safety violations. The lock had rusted, the air smelled of old oil and mold, but the key fit perfectly." When Hale and Lacey lifted the door, dust spilled out like smoke. Inside were 3 wooden crates, a metal filing cabinet, and a typewriter covered in cobwebs. It looked like someone had sealed a moment in time and walked away. The first crate contained newspaper clippings. Dozens of them, all yellowed with age. Headlines jumped out in jagged black ink. Towai and clerk found dead in courthouse fire, 1958. Husband reported missing after Binghamton blaze. Local woman flees town following tragedy. Each clipping was circled in red pencil. Every name crossed out, except one, Franklin Blackburn. The second crate was worse. Inside, Hale found old police photographs, water-damaged, grainy, but clear enough to show a woman resembling Catherine standing beside a man with his face half hidden in shadow. The same courthouse appeared in the background. The same smile. The detective's gut tightened. If Catherine's husband had really died in that courthouse fire, then why did he appear in photographs taken years after his supposed death? Lacey pointed to something at the bottom of the crate, a sealed envelope marked, "For Arthur Hale." It was dated 2 weeks before Catherine's death. Inside was a single page, typed neatly on the same kind of paper found in her home. "Detective Hale, if you are reading this, it means he found me again. The fire didn't kill him. I changed my name, but I couldn't change the past. You'll find what you need in locker 108. Please end this before he does it again. C. Blackburn." Hale's pulse quickened. He found me again. Those words echoed in his head as he searched the third crate. Inside was a tape recorder, the kind used in police interviews during the 1950s, and 2 reels of tape labeled Maple and Dalton. Back at the station, technicians carefully restored the recordings. On the first tape, Catherine's voice trembled as she spoke. "It started with the courthouse fire. He said it was an accident, but I saw him pour the kerosene. He wanted to erase the records, to disappear. I was supposed to run with him, but I couldn't. I thought he died that night. I thought I was safe." Then came silence, then static, then a man's voice, distorted but chillingly calm. "You always were a terrible liar, or Catherine." The second tape was even worse. It contained nothing but the faint hum of a car engine, a door opening, and the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps on a wooden floor. Hale turned off the player. His reflection in the glass partition looked as exhausted as he felt. "If Franklin Blackburn's alive," he muttered, "he's been planning this for years." By that afternoon, Hale obtained a warrant to reopen the Binghamton courthouse fire case. The archived documents had been partially restored using new forensic techniques. One report stood out. The fire had started in the records room, and the only person unaccounted for that night was a maintenance worker named Marcus Dalton M. Dalton. The name from the motel receipt, the alias on the photo, the same initials Catherine had mistaken for her husband's. Hale realized then that Catherine may not have been running from her husband. She might have been running with him. If Franklin Blackburn had assumed the name Marcus Dalton, then the two had faked his death, fled Binghamton, and built new lives on Maple Street until something went wrong. At sunset, Hale returned to Catherine's house. The forensics team had cleared out, leaving the rooms cold and hollow. He went through her desk drawers one more time, but this time, he noticed something different. The outline of a rectangular imprint beneath the desk's lining. He peeled it back carefully and found a hidden compartment. Inside was a single photograph of Catherine and Franklin standing outside their Albany home. On the back, written in the same typewriter font as the letter, was a line that froze him. "You can run, but Maple remembers everything." As Hale stared out the window toward the street, the quiet seemed heavier than ever. The maple trees swayed softly under the evening light, their branches whispering against the wind. And parked across the street, half hidden by shadow, sat a dark green sedan, engine off, lights dim. The same car that had been found abandoned days earlier, except this time, it wasn't empty. A faint ember glowed inside, the tip of a cigarette, and whoever was holding it was watching him. The truth beneath the floorboards. If you think the Maple Street case couldn't get any darker, think again, because what Detective Hale found next would change everything. Subscribe now, if you're brave enough to keep watching. Detective Arthur Hale didn't move. The glowing ember inside the green sedan burned like an accusation. Whoever sat in that car knew he'd found something, and wanted him to know they were still one step ahead. But when he stepped outside, the street was silent. The car door opened, still warm, cigarette smoldering in the ashtray. The driver was gone. In the back seat, Hale found a single manila envelope with his name on it. Inside was a torn section of an old Albany Gazette, dated July 12, 1959. The headline read, "Local woman and husband found dead in Binghamton fire. Case closed." Two faces were printed below it, Catherine and Franklin Blackburn. Someone had crossed out "found dead" and scribbled over it in red ink, "Not yet." At sunrise the next day, Hale ordered a full excavation of Catherine Blackburn's property. Every inch of Maple Street was combed over. The basement had already been searched, but the detective kept circling back to the same thought. Why had Catherine taped that key under her desk? He noticed faint grooves on the wooden floorboards, just beneath where her writing desk had been. One plank looked newer than the rest. He pried it open. Beneath the floor was a narrow cavity, no bigger than a crawlspace. Inside was a rusted metal box wrapped in oilcloth. Hale's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were dozens of documents, driver's licenses, fake birth certificates, old passports, all with different names but the same two faces, Catherine and Franklin. One alias stood out, Marcus Dalton. Tucked between the papers was a Tantine, other cassette tape labeled Maple Street, 1964. When the tape was played, the first voice was Catherine's, calm, measured, but weary. "If anyone finds this, he's alive. He's been watching the neighborhood for weeks. He says he forgave me, but I know better. He built something here, something hidden. I can hear the hum through the floor at night." Then her voice broke. "He said Maple remembers everything, that this town owes him." There was a pause. Then a door creaked open. Footsteps. A man's voice, low and steady. "I told you not to talk to them, Catherine." The sound cut off with a sharp click. Hale replayed the final seconds over and over, isolating the background noise. Beneath the voices was a mechanical hum, the kind made by electrical circuits. He traced the sound to the basement, where the cement wall bore a faint outline of an old door that had been bricked over. They broke through it. Behind the wall was a small sealed room. The smell of dust and oil hit first. Then came the sight. Shelves lined with recording equipment, film reels, and ledgers filled with detailed notes on Maple Street residents. Dates, addresses, phone numbers, habits. Every person who'd lived there for the past decade. It was a surveillance room. Every house on Maple Street had been wired with hidden microphones and cameras. The same network Catherine had heard humming under her floor. Hale realized with dawning horror that Franklin Blackburn hadn't just survived. He'd watched. He'd turned the entire neighborhood into his experiment, documenting lives like insects under glass. One file was labeled Hale. Inside was a photograph of the detective himself, standing outside Catherine's home, taken the day before. That's when Hale heard the sound again. Faint footsteps upstairs. He drew his gun, moving silently through the shadows. "Albany police, show yourself." The front door creaked open. By the time he reached it, the street was empty again. The maple trees swayed in the wind, their leaves whispering against the pavement. The only sign of life was a single envelope resting on his windshield. It read, "You shouldn't have dug that far." The investigation that followed would uncover more than Hale ever expected. Franklin Blackburn, alias Marcus Dalton, had been a fugitive since 1958. He'd worked in courthouse maintenance, destroyed the records that would expose his criminal past, and disappeared after faking his own death. Catherine's guilt had trapped her for years. She'd helped him start over on Maple Street, thinking she could control him. But when she tried to expose the truth, he silenced her, just like everyone else who'd gotten close. For decades, the Maple Street case went cold. Then, in 2002, DNA recovered from cigarette butts found near the crime scene was tested against old records. It matched a man who died in a state hospital under a different name, Marcus Dalton. Franklin Blackburn had been living under everyone's noses for 40 years. Detective Arthur Hale retired the following year, but he never forgot the message left on his car. The words haunted him every time he drove down that quiet street. Because Maple Street looked peaceful again, freshly painted fences, kids riding bikes, porch lights glowing warmly in the dark. But sometimes, when the wind blew just right, you could still hear it, the faint hum beneath the ground. And the cameras? No one ever found them all. If you thought this story was chilling, wait until you hear what happened next on another quiet street just like Maple. Hit subscribe because the next case might just be in your neighborhood.